Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is rapidly approaching, and my knowledge of Greek mythology has been very surface level, so I figured it was time to go through the famous poem. I'm Indian Jones, and I'm covering The Odyssey 4 books at a time, and today we're talking about books 5 through 8. Let's get to it. Okay, book 5. We start with all the gods gathering on Mount Olympus to talk about what they should do with Odysseus, and Athena's really pushing for him, and eventually Zeus agrees that he served his time, so he should be good to go. He's finally allowed to leave Calypso's island. One thing I found funny is that they always describe the gods as deathless. Like, come on, we know they're immortal, so I don't know why Homer keeps saying that over and over again. Also, there's a lot of personification throughout this poem, and any part of nature usually gets attributed to like a god, like dawn, for example. But I think I need to get my brain checked because certain lines I read out loud and I'm like, what the fuck? The one that actually caught me off guard was when he's talking about dawn, as in the rising sun, and he says, Rosy fingered dawn. And I was like, Rosie did what?
Get your head out of the gutter, John B.
I don't know though. Maybe it's intentional. Homer keeping it sensual, keeping the audience engaged. I don't know. Anyways, Hermes, I guess, is the resident scrub that gets sent by Zeus to deliver the news to Calypso. But I guess he is the messenger god after all, so it makes sense. So Hermes gets to Calypso's island and tells her that Odysseus has to be allowed to leave so he can go back home. And Calypso naturally takes this super well. No, she's super mad and blames the male gods for forcing this to happen, saying that they're mad that she found someone herself against their wishes, and because of that they're forcing Odysseus to leave so she can't be happy. She says that male gods can take whatever women they want, but female gods aren't allowed to do the same, and she saved Odysseus when Zeus destroyed his ship, so why can't she get what she wants? Calypso says she cared for him and loved him, but eventually she does give in and agree to let Odysseus go. Apparently Odysseus was always tearful, longing to go back home, but it's interesting that he said it's only because Calypso no longer pleased him and he doesn't want her even though she wants him. Calypso delivers the news to Odysseus, and at first he doesn't even believe that she's looking out for him and he thinks that it's a trap. But she insists that it's real, and she does offer Odysseus immortality to stay there with her, and told him she knows her body's better than his wife Penelope and that she's taller than Penelope. And Odysseus says he knows his modest wife, Anne Hathaway, of all people, would never match a deathless goddess, but he wants to go back nonetheless. Even though that's the love of her life, Calypso does her best to set Odysseus up and sends him off on his way on a raft. Odysseus spends many days on the ocean by himself on this makeshift boat, and he tries aiming for some land that he can see in the distance. Although unfortunately for him, Poseidon had just made it home and realizes what the other gods have done while he was gone and has to strike immediately to lay down some punishment on Odysseus. He conjures up a storm that destroys Odysseus' boat and sends him into the ocean. It has Odysseus wishing he died alongside his comrades in Troy rather than suffering here alone. But of course, Odysseus has plot armor, so multiple goddesses come to his rescue. First, it's Ino, who makes sure he's safe as he's rolling around in the water, and then Athena also helps him, and together they made sure that Odysseus eventually made it to shore and wakes up in this mysterious forest. Okay, book 6, here we go. We start book 6 with Athena appearing to the Phaeacian princess Nausicaa in a dream disguised as her friend. This has to be Athena's favorite thing to do, just show up as someone else to plant seeds. Maybe this is a way of people attributing certain dreams or interactions with strangers as coming from the gods, even though they don't physically see the gods, which is probably intentional by Homer. Anyways, Athena convinces Nausicaa to go to the river to wash her clothes so she'll increase her stature amongst all the people that were courting her for marriage, which didn't make sense to me because why would she do that if she was a princess? But whatever. So she goes to the river in the morning and is naked with her handmaidens playing around while Odysseus wakes up and gets a glimpse of them. And I guess I should mention that Odysseus was also naked, so yeah, lots of nudity in this book. Thanks, Homer. But Odysseus does end up covering up with the branch before going to ask them for help. But when asking for help, he never mentions who he actually is and opts to stay anonymous. Nausicaa lets him freshen up and bathe before further communication, but while this is happening, Athena had to intervene and increased his stats and made him look more godly and handsome. And Athena did this so next time that Nausicaa would see him, she would be more likely to fall in love with him. Is this Aphrodite or Athena at work here? What the hell?
What happened to me?
Love potion. A bloody strong one at that.
It kind of works, but she opts not to go into town with him because she's really afraid of causing a scene if other people see her walking side by side with a rando. So she ends up giving Odysseus directions to get to the palace and tips on what he should do once he gets there. So Odysseus prays to Athena, who of course gets off on listening to that as he makes his way to the palace. On to book 7. Odysseus is on his way to the palace to meet the king Alcinous, but gets stopped by a small girl who is, yet again, you guessed it, Athena in disguise. She tells him she'll guide the way for him to get to the palace and cover him in a shroud of mist so he doesn't get noticed by the Phaeacians, who are supposed to be kind, but they also aren't a huge fan of outsiders. And Athena also tells him he should focus on asking Arete, the queen, for help because she's the one who's most likely to find a way for him to get home. And once he gets to the palace, Athena dips immediately, so she must be pretty confident that things are going to work out for him. Funnily enough, when Odysseus gets to the palace, he finds out they're having a festival to honor Poseidon, who is Odysseus's biggest op. But as soon as he lays his eyes on the queen, he basically throws himself at her feet and is ready to beg for a way to get home. Which is cool to see because I feel like it's so uncharacteristic for a Greek hero to do that. Initially, the king actually ends up having doubts because he thinks Odysseus might actually be a god himself, but Odysseus is able to convince him that he's immortal somehow without even saying who he actually is. Then Odysseus explains the situation he was in, and surprisingly, they happily promise him a way to get home on some of their ships. This confused me for two reasons. The first being, I thought they didn't like outsiders, and yet they still agreed to find a way to send him home. Maybe it's because they'd rather him not be on their territory anymore. And the second reason, they don't even know exactly who he is, but they're still giving him a Phaeacian boat with some of their own people manning it. Later on, when it's just the king, queen, and Odysseus in the castle, the queen recognizes that Odysseus is wearing the clothes that she had made for her daughter Nausicaa. So naturally, the queen wants to find out more about Odysseus because she's still a bit suspicious, but eventually Odysseus tells her the whole story about how he got here from Calypso's island, still managing to keep his name anonymous though. Crazy. And I was baffled at how okay the king and queen were with this story and how they weren't mad at Odysseus, but mad at their daughter for not bringing Odysseus to them herself. Odysseus actually ends up taking the blame and saying it was his idea to come to the castle alone. And throughout this whole interaction with an unnamed man, somehow the king is so impressed, he just outright offered Odysseus his daughter's hand in marriage. Maybe, just maybe it's because he thought that Odysseus could still be a god, but still very odd overall to do that. All right, on to book 8. In this book, we get our second assembly of the poem so far, but this time it's the king, Alcinous, calling an assembly of his counselors. Athena makes sure that the people will attend this meeting by spreading the word that the topic of discussion is going to be the godlike visitor who appeared on the island. Someone needs to fact check this guy Odysseus, because there's been so many claims of him being godlike and being seen as a god. Like, are we sure he isn't the narrator? Anyways, Alcinous tells his council that he's thinking of giving a ship to this random unnamed visitor so he can make it back to his homeland. And his proposal does end up getting approved, and they later plan on having a party and Olympic-style games in honor of this strange guest, which seems so random to me. Well, not entirely random, because we know the Greeks really love these games.
I love these games!
Apparently, nothing is more important than what a man does with his hands and feet. Okay, anyways, at the feast, we see a blind bard named Demodocus who somehow knows a lot of different stories that happened, and he sings a song about the fight that Odysseus had with Achilles at Troy. Everyone enjoys the poem but Odysseus, who ends up crying, which is understandable because it probably brings back the worst memories. The king spots him crying and he immediately pivots to starting the games, which has the standard stuff like boxing, wrestling, chariot racing, discus. Odysseus is asked if he wants to participate, but he's feeling so battered with all that he's gone through that he declines. I can't imagine coming off of a war and then years of being stranded on Calypso's island and then wanting to take part in something like this. And then the worst part is one of the young cocky Phaeacians essentially insults Odysseus and calls him soft for not wanting to participate, which actually convinces Odysseus to come out of retirement and join in.
Quote unquote, I'm back.
And Odysseus is like, okay, dude, you want the smoke? Here it is. He participates in the discus and big dicks everyone, winning easily. It's hilarious that right after that, Athena feels the need to disguise herself in the crowd and hype him up, saying stuff like even a blind man can see that he threw it the furthest by far. Is Athena the first documented hype woman in history? Even if she's not, I think she still has a claim to being the greatest hype woman of all time. Okay, yeah, after the discus though, Odysseus berates the guy who mocked him and challenges everyone else, saying he'll take anyone on in any challenge, but King Alcinous diffuses the situation again and says they're gonna have another feast. At this feast, the Phaeacians give Odysseus a bunch of gifts for his journey home. It still really baffles me how much they're treating him like a celebrity. They held games for him and had multiple feasts for someone whose name they don't even know. The celebrity treatment and how easily he destroyed all the young athletes in discus makes me think that Odysseus might actually be the unreliable narrator people claim him to be. But anyways, at dinner, Demodocus the bard performs again, but this time tells the story about the affair between Aphrodite and Ares, as Hephaestus gets shown to be the fool for letting his woman sleep with another man. And Hephaestus ends up trapping Ares as punishment for it. Is this the first recorded telling of this love triangle? Because I feel like it gets mentioned in every modern iteration of Greek mythology, and I know I remember first reading about this as a kid in Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Also, it seems like every version of Hephaestus has me sympathizing with him. But this poem is actually hilarious because we get the POV of other gods hearing that Ares got trapped by Hephaestus as revenge, and we actually get to hear some dialogue between Apollo and Hermes. Apollo asks if Hermes would have slept with Aphrodite if he were in the same situation, knowing the punishment Hephaestus was going to lay out. And Hermes says he'd be bound 3 times as much as Ares was if it meant he could sleep with Aphrodite, which I don't know if I can blame him. It is Aphrodite that we're talking about. After that ends, Odysseus asks for a specific song about the Trojan horse and the fall of Troy. It's super cool to actually hear more about this event in Troy, and the flashback is one of the clips we actually got to see as part of the IMAX trailers for the Odyssey, which got me super hyped. But as Demodocus goes through the story, everyone is really enjoying it, but Odysseus, who is weeping again as it takes him back to the past, and it's bittersweet because there was a lot accomplished, but he did lose a lot of people. It's cool to see a story within a story though through these poems, and they even have their own dialogue, and I'm wondering how Nolan is going to handle all of this, but it's obviously up his alley. Also, is this Bard the person that Travis Scott's going to be playing in this movie? Anyways, when Alcinous sees Odysseus crying again at the poem of Troy, he stops the music and finally confronts Odysseus on who he is and wants to know the full story and his name. I think he has a hunch that he's actually a hero of Troy. We also get some foreshadowing at the end of this book that Poseidon hates how much the Phaeacians help lost sailors get to where they need to go, and that eventually it's going to come back to bite them in the ass, and one of their boats isn't going to make it back home. It's going to be interesting to hear the tale of Odysseus from Odysseus himself and see how the dynamic changes now that his identity is out there. Okay, that's a wrap on books 5 through 8 of the Odyssey. I will catch you guys next week for books 9 through 12. See ya!